Substantially Insubstantial is the name of the game today. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, bringing you finally another quick tips for DMs episode talking about Incorporeal Undead. We have a specific one in mind today, but before we start digging into any of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such a legendary roster of incredible heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now, let's talk about why you want to use Incorporeal Undead and some things that you can do to make them just a bit more terrifying for your players. So to begin with, the first thing to understand with the Undead is that they have a whole array of traits. Now, this is not everything. I definitely recommend you read up on specifically all of the Undead traits so you can be better prepared for running them. But some of the highlights are things like dark vision out to 60 feet, immunity to all mind-affecting effects, charms, compulsions, morale effects, patterns, and phantasms, death effects, disease, paralysis, poison, sleep effects, stunning, non-lethal damage, ability drain or energy drain, damage to its constitution, dex, and strength scores, since it doesn't have a physical form to harm, as well as exhaustion and fatigue effects. You also have immunity to any effect that requires a fortitude save, unless the effect also works on objects or is harmless for undead creatures. They're also obviously not at risk of death from massive damage, but is immediately destroyed when reduced to 0 hit points, so no negative damage for the undead. But there's still more things to look at. You have also that they're not affected by raise dead and reincarnate spells or abilities. Resurrection and True Resurrection can affect undead creatures. These spells will turn undead creatures back into the living beings that they were before becoming undead. And an incorporeal creature has no physical body. An incorporeal creature is immune to critical hits and precision-based damage, such as sneak attack damage, unless the attacks are made using a weapon with the Ghost Touch special weapon quality. Bear in mind, physical armor, unless it is so enchanted, does not hinder an undead creature's attacks at all. They are resolving through touch attacks more often than not if they're incorporeal undead, if they lack those physical forms and manifestations. So this is where you can already begin to see how frightening undead can be for a party, particularly a party that's not quite prepared to deal with them. This is true for any creatures, but by and large, most creatures with physical forms the party is going to be able to affect on some level to a certain degree. Certainly if there's damage reduction, that's going to prove more challenging in those instances, but they'll still be able to do it. They still have all those mind affecting things, whereas an undead creature, and especially incorporeal undead, physical attacks are going to be nigh on useless against them unless they're using specifically enchanted or enhanced weapons. All those mind-affecting things, those charms and the like, those are all going to be useless. And so, with Incorporeal Undead, I want to present to you the Humble Wraith for your consideration. Normally, these are only a challenge rating 5 creature, but even a challenge rating 5 creature can still pose a significant threat to an unprepared party, especially if you set up the encounter to be particularly devious. So to start with, and again, this is just kind of a quick Cliff Notes sort of highlights, definitely take a look over the full statistical array of the Wraith. But they have a perception of +7, an armor class of 18, 47 hit points, a fly speed of 60 feet. For defenses, they have channel resistance +2, they're incorporeal, and they have the undead traits, most of which we just went over. For their melee attacks, they have an Incorporeal Touch of +6, dealing 1d6 negative energy damage and a 1d6 constitution drain. They can also create spawn. Creatures slain become Wraiths, and Wraith spawn in 1d4 rounds. And they also have a life sense living beings within 60 feet, like the blind sense ability. So, the Incorporeal Touch, let's start with that. Let's say, just hypothetically, we have a level 10 character, a fighter, dexterity of 12, and they have a ring of protection +1, gives that +1 deflection bonus, and they're wearing full plate. Now, let's go with Masterwork full plate. Now, that full plate provides a significant chunk of their defense already. It's about a +9 right there. So they have a defense of 21. Now, with a +6 rating, attack rating, the Wraith is not going to have a very easy time hitting that character, except for the fact that they ignore the armor class. They're going straight off of touch, meaning that it's only going to be a DC of 12 for them to hit their target. So anytime you roll a d20, 6 and up is going to be a success. So that's pretty good odds right there. And negative energy damage is not a very common kind of resistance to have. And the Endure Elements spell, resist elements, those things that resist all those different elemental damages, don't typically cover this. And then there's that Constitution drain. While there is an associated fortitude save, if the fighter fails, Constitution is something that anybody relies on for keeping alive in combat, but the fighter even more so given their presence on the front line. And even if you just get a 3, if they have a Constitution score of 18, they're going from that +4 bonus down to a +2. So that's 2 hit points knocked off of every single level. So that's 20 hit points of damage right there, or at least a 20 hit point reduction on their overall hit point totals on top of the negative energy damage that they're taking. And if that character's Constitution score gets reduced to 0, they're toast. They're toast, and they end up becoming Wraith spawn after 1d4 rounds. And 1d4 rounds, that multiplies the threat on the battlefield. Now, Wraith spawn are not as strong as Wraiths, but even still, that's another threat for the players to have to worry about. Now, something else to note, for when you want to make these creatures a bit more terrifying, it's often simplest to just add more hit dice to them. In our case, we want to go up to about a 9 hit dice Wraith. That's a 4 hit die increase right there, because challenge rating 5 creature, the Wraith has 5 hit dice as it is. This gives us some extra feats to work with. Now we don't want to swap out blind sense or improved initiative. We want to swap out combat reflexes. Those feats are what come standard to their statistical array, their setup. We want to swap out combat reflexes. It's not going to be super important for us in this case. What we do want to take, though, with these extra feats and the one swap out we do is dodge, mobility, and spring attack, because it's got a fly speed of 60 feet. Now, some might say maybe we want to go with flyby attack, but for these purposes I'm willing to say that spring attack will work out just fine in this instance. What we're going to do is, with this particular setup, we're going to have the Wraith attack from inside walls. They jump out, even if it's a larger hallway. If it's a 20-foot wide hallway, they can still spring out from the cover the wall provides, swipe at a target, and then jump back into the walls behind them, or continue on past. They'll take attacks of opportunity if they go through all those threatened squares, but if they catch the players by surprise, the surprise round, they should be fine. But even if it's a prepared instance of combat there, they go through, they take the attacks of opportunity and dive back for cover inside of the walls. So this makes it difficult for the players to retaliate, even if they get their defenses and enchantments up. And remember, incorporeal creatures can pass through these solid barriers, so they're not just limited to attacking through the walls, they can reach up through the floors, and they have life sense. And they also come with the blind fighting feat as well, so if whatever the percentage mischance is for attacking, which would be whatever the concealment totals would be, I'm blanking on that right off the top of my head, they can still reach through the floor and start attacking at the feet and ankles of the player characters and begin dealing damage and constitution drain on them as well. And they're not limited to just attacking the fighters, any of them are open. Wizards are particularly vulnerable to constitution drain. Their constitution scores tend to not be as good, and their fortitude saves aren't that great either. So this makes them particularly vulnerable to this attack. And again, use that incorporeality, use that mobility to your advantage, and mix that up with the terrain. and throw these kinds of creatures at your players. There's a whole host of possibilities that are available here, and a challenge rating 9 Wraith would make for a pretty awesome story, especially if the players came up with something clever for dealing with it, like, I don't know, using create water and then blessing that water for holy water, preventing the Wraiths from going through the floor without taking damage. They'll instinctively and naturally recoil from that. But you want to encourage that kind of clever play, and you do so by throwing clever opponents and situations at your players. And this is why I love the Undead, especially Incorporeal Undead. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Either way, hit those like or dislike buttons and let me know in the comments down below so that we can engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.